Hello, and welcome to Wired for Change, where we look at the people, technologies, and ideas reshaping our world. I'm your host, Amy Yee. Today, we're going to look at something that leaders don't always talk about out loud. In cybersecurity and in digital transformation more broadly, there's pressure to project control. So, dashboards, plans, having all the answers, all of that is something that people want. But what happens when you don't actually know what you have? Modern organizations operate across hybrid environments, multi cloud, legacy systems, third parties, layers of complexity where real risk can hide in plain sight. And many leaders think that they have the visibility until they realize that they don't. That moment can feel destabilizing, it can feel risky, and that's the moment we're going to talk about today. I'm joined by Nicole Severin from Tanium. She spends her time working with large organizations navigating this exact reality. Together, we're going to have a look at why visibility is harder than it sounds, why perceived security often doesn't align with real risk, and how leaders can make it safe enough to move forward. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Amy. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me and really passionate about this conversation and looking forward to diving in with you.
Terrific. Thank you. And so, I guess, when you look across at the organizations that you've worked with, how would you describe the real complexity that they're dealing with?
Well, I think you provided a great introduction when you spoke about the complexity, hybrid work, cloud expansion, legacy systems, unmanaged devices. What it really means is that the attack surface is growing faster, and so fast that teams often can't keep up. So when I'm chatting with leaders, they tell me that they are struggling to have that single source of an authoritative view of their environment. So, understanding truly what they have, and then also truly understanding their risk posture. Second, I think, they're dealing with fragmented tooling landscapes. They have quite often very siloed teams with dozens of security and IT tools that might each be telling a slightly different story. And this is where gaps and duplications and delays happen. So I know most leaders are not struggling because they have lack of data. It's that they're drowning in that data and they're collecting it. They're collecting it from multiple tools that quite often don't talk well with each other. And that makes an impact on how they make strategic decisions. Third, I would say that the pace and pressure in environments has changed. We all know that. We're all experiencing it. Teams are expected to respond to threats and outages and vulnerabilities in minutes now, not days or weeks. And this is really tough when we have these constantly changing environments, teams that are taxed, teams that are leveraging tools that were never truly designed for that real time unified visibility in the environment. And I think a perfect example of this is the new average time to exploit that has come out. So, for the first time in history, the average time to exploit is -1 days. So, what does that mean? It means that threat actors are taking advantage and exploiting vulnerabilities before patches are released. So many years ago, this was like, 23 days. And then I think it got brought down to 5 days. Now it's -1 day.
Oh, dear.
So now more than ever, it's critical. Like speed is critical. Speed matters more than ever because manual processes simply can't keep up with the speed of modern risk.
That's a lot for modern leaders to their heads around, right? So,
Right?
first not knowing what's there and then needing to respond so quickly is going to require sort of people, process, and technology, for sure. And thank you for, that example as well. So, what other conversations are they having with you? Are they just, straight up like, I know I don't know, what I have, or is it more of a, we have these processes in place, but they're not quite working. At what point are people talking to you?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
um, I think it's first of all, leaders, when we're chatting, they assume that their metrics and their dashboards and analytics are accurate, right?
Mhm.
They don't have skepticism about that, but it's almost like they don't know what they don't know. And here at Tanium, we call that the visibility gap. And in a recent study, 94% of IT decision makers admit to discovering endpoints in their organization that they were not previously aware of. And this is significant because ESG has reported that when a breach happens, 70% of the time, it's occurring on an unknown asset. So it's that concept that you can't protect what you don't know about. And quite often, it's not, when I speak with leaders, they're not struggling about knowing if their technology is right or, what teams are using it. It's really about the speed at which they can make decisions with certainty. So we start having those conversations at that very high level. How are you making decisions fast enough in today's complex world?
Mhm. And often, like, the leaders I'm guessing that the leaders who are, overseeing all of this, like the IT leaders and the security leaders, they have a better sense of what they know and what they don't know. But then leaders, there's the CEO and other leaders within the organization, there's another gap there, in terms of what they know. And what they know they
Mhm.
don't know, I imagine, as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And different teams manage that very differently. I think executives typically experience that complexity out at the outcome level. So they're managing their acceptance of risk, the accountability, the missed deliverables or the missed outcomes that they have to manage versus the technical teams. They're looking at the chaos underneath it all.
Mhm.
So you have your CIOs, CEOs that are saying we're spending millions of dollars on tools, but why can't I truly understand right now how many vulnerable endpoints do we have?
Mhm.
And the technical teams, I think they're living that pain directly because they're the ones firefighting data discrepancies. They're stitching together data really to be able to deliver on what the executives are asking for. So there's this bit of push and pull, I would say.
For sure, for sure. Wow, and are there any areas where, people often think they have more clarity than they actually do?
Yeah, I think that definitely comes through some of the analytics that executives rely on. And I think that's because quite frequently they get point in time snapshots. And I call this the everything is green dashboard disconnect. Right?
This
um,
this must be an acronym for
so
that too. I'm, like, trying to think of what it is.
if everything's green, we're living in a great
Yeah.
world. And, quite commonly executives are seeing monthly or quarterly reports, but their technical teams know that there's drift in those numbers as soon as that report is delivered. And there's a lot of complexities in that, right? You have, for example, tools that show, patch analytics only on certain devices. You have endpoints that are off the network or unmanaged. You have vulnerability scanners that are providing point in time analytics. You have tools that are disagreeing with each other on the data. So there's a lot of complexity to manage there. But I think it's really going back to the necessity to have real time information so that when you have something that's going on in your environment, you know right now what's going on and be able to make those strategic decisions.
Okay, and then just a little bit more on the current landscape then. Is there anything like, we know that there's a lot of complexity, all those layers that we've talked about. Is there anything just in the last couple of years that has had kind of an outsized impact on this complexity or the risk?
Okay, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say the word AI.
Yeah, I wasn't setting you up for that at all.
I know we're all tired of talking about
Yes.
it, but I want to take this conversation in two lenses. The first is just the way threat actors are leveraging AI. So As a leader, if your visibility is a few hours old or days old, you're already behind because threat actors are using AI in real time, and most tools and technologies out there are not. So that's the first critical element. Then I would say, from the lens of using AI within your organization as a way to keep up, um, it has to be able to accelerate automation in a way that's going to enhance your organization's capabilities, but it can't fix bad data. In fact, I think it exacerbates it, right? So if you're using AI within your organization, but you have stale or information across the organization, again, you're behind. So there's two lenses that I think you have to consider AI when it comes to cyber and automation across the environment.
Wow. So, I mean, it would make like at first glance, like looking at all of this, even for somebody who's not, in cyber, it's kind of so what's the point, right? Is there a point to trying? Is almost, what I can hear or imagine like some executives kind of saying, like if everything is behind and things are in real time and there's so much complexity that we can't sort of pull together the data to make sense or meaning of it, what is the point or what should give me hope that there's still something that we can manage and something that we can de-risk?
Oh, there's always hope. um,
I'm being the skeptic here.
yeah. Yeah, I think, it's creating a foundation of bringing teams together. So, where I'm seeing success across organizations is breaking down the silos. Traditionally, teams in IT and cyber, often had competing priorities, right? I would hear things like, well, IT is judged on efficiency, security is judged on compliance, cloud teams are judged on speed. Like there's these conflicts of priorities, but organizations that I see adapting and working really well are kind of level setting across the ecosystem, breaking down those silos and leveraging more of a holistic approach to automation and cyber resilience. And that is, a people process conversation as well as a technology conversation. And I think, when you see success in organizations, it's about, first of all, creating a space where you can talk about some of the blind spots in the environment, and it's a safe place to talk about some of those blind spots, and that will help teams to collaborate. So understanding each team's priorities, but what that means for the organization as a whole to improve more holistically.
That's great, and this is a perfect segue to, I mean, moving from just taking a look at the landscape and understanding some of the dynamics there, and then really making it, feel real in terms of what that disconnect really looks like. And so, I was wondering if you could give us an example of that people process kind of change, that helps to, connect people more in terms of how leaders might feel and what's really happening on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, I think fragmented ownership really is still one of the biggest problems that I say keeps risk hidden
Mhm.
within an organization. So when different teams own different pieces of the environment, it's really hard to see that holistic picture, and that creates a perfect environment for risk to hide. Everyone believes that their part is covered, and they assume that somebody else is handling the rest.
Mhm.
And fragmentation makes it uncomfortable for any one leader within those teams to raise their hand and say, you know what, we don't actually have a complete view because there's blinders on. But then again, you compare that to teams who've broken down those silos, they're able to actually achieve incredible automation seamlessly across workflows and across teams. And it's amazing how different this is. And I think that also starts with, you know, uh, creating a safe place because it's not about people that they're necessarily feeling unsafe about raising an issue or concern in their environment. Sometimes what I see is that they feel trapped inside a silo and buried under so much process or red tape that raising a concern or putting their hand up, they don't feel motivated that it will lead to a fix. So when processes are slow, ownership is fragmented, people stop surfacing issues because they don't necessarily believe it will change. So it's creating that environment and opportunity for change.
That's so true. I did an episode a couple months ago with Lena Dabbitt, and she was talking about how this whole idea of, people will tell you once, and then, if there isn't any kind of reaction or response or solution or movement, then they'll stop believing that something will change. Right. And so that is really, critical to creating the right environment for change to happen. I'm wondering if you could give an example of like two of those, silos where you might have, one thing owned by one department and something else owned by another department where there is this fragmentation that needs to be de-siloed in some way.
Yeah, sure. It's quite commonly what I call the ping pong effect.
Oh,
effect.
good.
And
Another one.
I'm sure many people have heard about it. You have your security team that's responsible for finding out what's happening in the environment, what's going wrong, scanning for vulnerabilities. And then you have the ping pong or the swivel chair effect where they pass it over to the IT operations team, and they're responsible to perform the work. And then they ping pong it back to security and they have to validate that that work was done and they rescan and it matches. Um, and it's interesting because this is not only inefficient, it's different tools, different data sets, different teams that are like butting heads, but it's also costly.
Mhm.
And this is what I really like to point out to organizations is that um, there's a lack of automation that's happening between those teams, and it can cost organizations so much money.
Mhm.
um, and when we talk about, just that creating that ecosystem, I sometimes talk about this with my customers where I say, what is the cost of doing nothing? Or what is the cost of staying exactly the same way? It's an interesting conversation because when issues stay siloed, risk stays hidden, they don't stay small. They turn into more systemic risks. And by the time those risks finally surface, we see it during an outage, an incident, a breach, and then it's too late to be proactive. So I'm seeing this show up very early on in my conversations to think about, how could this type of cost affect your organization? And let's quantify that, thinking about operational downtime, lost revenue, regulatory penalties, even things like cyber insurance if people have that, rates there. And last but not least, reputation. They're not very theoretical costs anymore. They become very real. And
Mhm.
it positions an organization to really rethink their strategy.
Hmm. And so thank you for that. And then when you have like a ping pong effect that's happening, what's an example of the kind of shift that could resolve this and make it more efficient?
Yeah, I think working from a shared data set is a real example. So having teams that are working from a commonality that allows them to automate some of the work that is manual and that they don't like doing, um, and giving more attention to the high touch, high priority, critical infrastructure, critical assets that need to be more under a microscope. It allows them to give them the time to do the best work that they desire to
Mhm.
do. Most organizations that I speak with, they have this kind of backlog of what they need to get to. And it's like, okay, I'll get to that when my high priority list is done. But they never end up getting there.
No.
So it's, taking some of that work, creating automated workflows to handle it so that they are always sharp and focused for that high priority work.
Mhm. Yeah, somebody has to actually own that, the backlog,
Mhm.
really well.
Yeah,
It's
and
gotta
it's
be their
it leads
job.
to
Yep.
it leads to technical debt
Mhm.
too, right?
Mhm.
That's a big priority for a lot of organizations I speak with as well.
It's tough, and I appreciate your point around, yeah, everybody wants to do a good job at this, right? But there are
Mhm.
things that kinda stand in the way sometimes or friction, that needs to be reduced. We talked, a
Yeah.
few minutes ago about kind of the green effect. Green's actually my favorite color too.
Me too,
Alright,
actually.
great. The green effect, and so I wanted to get into again, like, I really appreciate this line of, these are real experiences or real things that you hear from customers or real things that you've seen. I appreciate these examples. So, why do compliance dashboards sometimes create that false sense of confidence? And then what do you do about it, I guess? Like, how do you know when you're getting a false sense of confidence? What do teams sort of have to question when that happens? And is it always kind of a questioning? I guess I'd love to get into maybe an example or some of the practices that you've seen around this green effect.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the key to this is that sometimes leaders simply aren't given the full pictures. Um, and for an organization that has invested millions into tools or services, this can be daunting because it can feel like those investments haven't delivered as expected. But I think the reality is that blind spots don't mean that the strategy was wrong. It just means that the visibility wasn't there. So they weren't given the correct information. And at Tenium, we see that every day.
Mm,
It's not that organizations are choosing poorly or that it's more so that they were not given a complete, accurate view of the environment in the first place. And so that's challenging as a leader because cyber is a role that leaders want to have absolute certainty.
mhm,
They don't want to talk about blind spots. Um, they want to be able to be certain when they're in a situation, a high pressure situation, um, to be able to say that I don't know. That pressure is huge, right? They never want to be in that position. But I think we're seeing a shift right now where leaders who have been through real incidents are realizing that it isn't about admitting to having blind spots, it's about not having the right data to get answers fast. And this is helping to create a culture where being transparent is a strength. It's not a weakness. It's about helping others to get truly prepared. And I've actually really seen this lately in a meeting within Cyber Alberta Community of Interest, where a member openly spoke about, a breach and lessons learned for this, and spoke about it for the greater good of the province, because it's a learning experience. So I think that stigma is changing. I think people are being more transparent and recognizing that cyber is a team sport, and we're all in Canada here to help each other out.
I think I got some shivers when you said that example. It's like, oh, yay,
It's
goosebumps.
amazing.
It takes so much
It's very
bravery to do
humbling,
that.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's very brave. It's very brave, and I love that the culture is changing around that. It's not about hiding. It's about offering your insight and lessons learned for the greater good of Canadians.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I remember, I mean, 5 to 10 years ago, it wasn't something that you felt like you could talk about, in open
Hmm.
forums, or, it had to be anonymous in some way. So, um, seeing that is certainly, a shift. And, I would wonder, as well, like, what are the things you think that led to this shift or that can lead to this shift? Do you think it's simply like that there's more information out there now, so it's become more socialized? Do you think it's something that, enough people have modeled so that it's catching on a little bit more? Or do you think it was just particular forums where it's easier to do that than in other forums?
I think it's been some key leaders
Mhm.
in the community. I definitely see cyber as a community where we're very much willing to support each other. And there's been some key steps in community groups across the nation to help build awareness, support, recognition, guidance, um, for all of us to do better
Mhm.
because you're never going to know everything. It's the most humbling work because you're never going to know everything and you're learning every day. And I think some key leaders across the nation have done a great job to create awareness, whether you're a large or a massive organization. And that's very meaningful. I think it's also about leaders who are shifting into assessment mode, asking a ton of questions and really smart questions. It's not like it used to be about blame, it's about gaining clarity so that more confident answers and decisions can be made. I had actually one CIO who I was working with recently say, discovering a blind spot isn't the problem, not knowing about it is.
Mhm.
So that was really cool.
That is cool. That is cool. I really like that. And I mean, not every organization is there yet,
Mhm.
probably. And I'd love to hear any other kind of stories or lessons that people have learned in this area. Because even sometimes we were just talking about like the green effect and reports and not having all the information. Sometimes it's hard for a leader to even just go back and say, you know what, we were wrong or we didn't have all the information, or that information that I gave to the board or that I presented like 3 months ago, that's actually that wasn't correct because, you are accountable for that information that you've shared, right? Based on everything that you're doing the best that you can. But do you have any stories or lessons learned that makes it easier for people to go back and say they were wrong or that they didn't know and how to move forward?
Yeah, talk to your teams.
Mhm.
um, get a real sense of what is the real scope of the problem and quantify that problem. Talk to your people closest to the work, and they're going to give you that real sense of the problem. Take that information and extrapolate it into a quantifiable problem because as a leader, when it comes time to go to the board to ask for funding to make a change, you need to have a good business case and solid metrics. But sorry, just taking a step
Mhm.
back there as well. In order to talk to your teams, you need to create organizational safety for teams to surface issues without friction. Um, so, creating that space for innovation and understanding, getting closer to the people that are doing the work. Then I would also say, talk to your peers in the same industry, create a network. So, what are others doing? What lessons have they learned? As I said, this is a team sport. Some of the best conversations that I've helped guide along or have been when I've been listening to a CIO or a CISO and they're saying, this is what we're going through. And I'm like, I've heard that somewhere else. You need to talk to so and so. And I help to connect them. And that is so valuable because it's a peer talking to a peer and it's creating that network, creating that safe space um, to share ideas and ways forward.
Mm. Yeah, that peer-to-peer learning is a great resource for people, and if you're able to connect them, then that's terrific. And have you seen like
Mhm.
situations where someone has known something, or known something was going to happen, perhaps, but didn't feel safe kind of raising it?
Absolutely. It happens, I think, more times than
It's
people want to
probably an obvious
admit.
question, but I really wanted to
Yeah.
see if I could get any examples or stories out of you for that one.
Yeah, and again, I think it's going back to that mentality of raising the hand or raising the concern or the question is there's not enough validation that that's going to fix anything or change anything. So again, it's a cultural way that teams can evolve, but um we always, what I hate to hear is that cost of doing nothing, right? And something bad happening. And it's tough because once you see something that doesn't look quite right or something that's going on in the environment, you can't unsee it.
Mhm.
So it's that conscious decision about what to do next. And I think it's working with partners that you trust, peers that you trust, leading technological partners to say, okay, where is this happening with other organizations? How have you helped solve? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to, expose everything that you've seen, but I think it's asking the right questions, taking assessment of the ecosystem, and so critical is getting accurate data back about your environment.
Right. And when leaders realize that they have, blind spots, what's the most common, first reaction that you see?
Questioning,
Yeah.
tons of questions.
Mm-hmm.
You would think it would be like reactionary, like, well, why is this happening? And I don't see that so
Mm-hmm.
often. It's okay. Questioning and reaching out to the ecosystem for help. And that's what the smartest leaders I think are doing. And then before, really launching into a new initiatives, it's just getting clarity. So their priority should be understanding what's at risk today, what's at risk tomorrow, what could that look like 30 days from now, and talking to their teams. Because again, um, it's understanding what's going on right now and leveraging the ecosystem of the people that they have closest to the work to be able to help them. Um, and it's not getting overwhelmed by the noise. The key is to replace noise with truth. Most organizations are overwhelmed not because they have, too much risk, it's because they have too much conflicting data.
Mm-hmm.
So the first foundational element is create that single reliable view of the environment, and get everyone looking at that same source of truth and prioritizing what you need to do first becomes more simple instead of chaotic. And then from there, organizations can focus on, the things that come next, the assets that are exposed, what's reachable, what's unpatched, and what could actually be exploitable, just rather than not knowing what's going on in the environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And all of that would help to, assess the impact of anything that's, immediately occurring as well, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. And so we were talking about how leaders can, prioritize without being overwhelmed by noise. Are there any other like practices you would recommend for leaders beyond what you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think good teams start when, like, achieving desired outcomes when they both agree on the data that they're working with, when they're
Right.
stopping that ping pong effect, as I call it. So, aligning teams, from detection to prioritization to remediation and then validation, and removing the friction in between all of those steps. This is truly where the magic happens. When IT and security teams operate in silos, organizations pay for it, literally.
Hmm.
Um, when teams are aligned, it eliminates that ping pong effect, and it eliminates the drain and the time spent, and is also lighter on the budget.
Yeah, because like, the more like you're seeing something different from like the person who is, sitting next to you, like the longer that it takes to align and agree that you're seeing the same things, like the further apart you get, and every second kind of matters a lot of the time as well. So that's a really good point around aligning on the data.
Yeah, the data is foundational because that's going to allow you to make quick decisions that are, in those hot moments. That's what's going to matter most.
That's great. Um, Good. So, is there anything that you would say about how platforms and partners can be used to support clarity and accountability rather than mask uncertainty?
Yeah, I think platforms and partners should really bring truth to the surface, not bury it, not make it, look good in a green dashboard. The right technology and the right partner doesn't want to hide, a challenging environment. They want to eliminate uncertainty by giving everyone the same real-time visibility and operational footing because they want to create that safety and make it okay to look at the real state of the environment instead of that comfortable version. because you can't have accountability across, very diverse teams without that clarity. And to have clarity, you got to have that real time view. So, um, the next piece of it, I think, is you match that clarity with the ability to act. So, using platforms and teams shouldn't just show you the problem, they should help you solve it. Because it's all good to see something, but then you got to do something about it. And if you can do that in an autonomous way and automate the workflows across all of it, um, you're going to be able to act fast and keep up with the modern day threat.
Okay. And so, okay, so you've listed a number of things, and I guess just based on what you've seen in the field, what does it look like when an organization has this kind of relatively nailed? So they've got like the automations that are required. They've kind of de-siloed. They have a safe environment. Maybe this doesn't exist, but I'm saying in the ideal kind of scenario,
Yes.
in the ideal scenario, what does that kind of feel like? Can you give us a sense of what are some of the indicators that that these things are in place for success?
I love this question. Um, what it looks like is a bit of a change in mindset in how they approach their environment. Um, Traditionally, humans are very cyclical. They perform scheduled actions at scheduled times. When you're moving towards a more holistic view with automations across teams and a single source of truth, the way you operate becomes continuous. So, I'll give you an example. The thought of like Patch Tuesday or your monthly patching goes away. Instead, it's always on patching
Mm,
because you're able to leverage real time data, real time compliance, and it's constantly happening. And you're making decisions as the minutes go by. Those are the teams that are doing amazing things. They're like I said, automating work that they can set and forget, so that the high touch priorities are where they're spending their time, and it's allowing them to decrease that mountain of legacy work and really focus on the business outcomes that they're designed to do. Serving their communities, generating revenue, delivering services, all of those first conversations you and I talked about that executives are managing.
mhm.
All the teams are aligned to those outcomes.
It sounds beautiful. I almost don't wanna ask this next question. Okay, so, conversely, what does it look like? Are there any warning signs or indicators that an organization might think it's got, visibility or think that everything's okay, but maybe they don't, and maybe there are some, challenges that they need to address, sooner rather than later?
Yes. And here's a good question of organizations to, go back and talk to their teams about. So when I first meet with teams, I sit in the room and I say, okay, security team, IT, operations, compliance. If I asked each one of you to write down on a piece of paper how many assets you have, how close would your answers be with each other?
Oh.
And almost always, there is quite a discrepancy. And this is an interesting one because um, when your, EDR tooling, your CMDB or your patching tools, your vulnerability scanners, your asset management tools all report different counts, it's a warning sign that the foundation of your cyber hygiene posture is unstable. Again, going back to, if you don't know what you have, how can you keep it secure? Unknown and unmanaged endpoints are where the breaches are begin. We've already talked about that, but it's not just our point of view. It's actually a position of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, which highlights in their cybersecurity readiness toolkit. Step one is asset identification, with an emphasis on discovering and managing unknown and unmanaged assets. So the what you don't know about. And I think they call this out because attackers look for those blind spots. Um, and these inconsistent asset inventories are exactly that, and what threat actors take advantage of. The second thing I watch out for in my conversations is when um, different teams disagree on severity of risk.
Mm,
When those teams are looking at different sets of data or different portions of the environment, they're each seeing only a fraction of that truth. And this leads to um, that partial visibility challenge, which leads to inability to make that holistic strategic decision on action. So those are some of the signs I like to talk about with organizations very early. I think asset management is very foundational to cyber hygiene.
great. Thank you for that. Those are very useful. I can see those they're working very well for you and for others. So thanks for sharing those. Um, anything else to say just on the idea that it's still knowing all of your assets and endpoints. It's still harder than it sounds. Like it sounds straightforward, right? To someone who's not managing it today, it might sound straightforward. Just kind of like know it all, like make a list kind of thing, right? Do you have anything else to say just in terms of why is it a challenge for organizations?
Yeah. Again, going back to the complexity of this world of work we're in
Mhm.
with the expansion of cloud, hybrid work, devices all over the place, unmanaged devices coming on and off the network, mobile, containers, like IT, OT. It's a lot. It is a lot. And it's hard to get that clarity in real time, what you actually have, and it's very risky. So it's not easy. It's a challenge that most organizations struggle with, and it sounds so foundational, and it's so elemental in thinking about cyber hygiene, but um, it does create blind spots for organizations. I think just the awareness of that and how the Canadian Cyber Centre has highlighted that as kind of a key step is a good reminder for all organizations.
Yeah, and it's a good note that many organizations struggle with it. And it's not,
Hmm.
a blame game and you're not alone in struggling with it. And that executives who are not as close to, cyber or IT, shouldn't be, shocked and appalled, but they should look at, well, how can we support because it is important. So that's a good note. I'd like to move now to talking just about careers and mindsets. We've talked a little bit about leaders and their reactions and how they can create safe environments and why that's important. And so, I guess what mindsets do you think matter most for someone growing into a cybersecurity leadership role today?
Great question. And I love this question because I was that person not too long ago. um, I think there is a real sense of imposter syndrome for a lot of people in this industry, because it's so challenging. You're constantly learning. And what I did early on in my career is just connected with the network of professionals that are so keen to share knowledge, mentorship, and leadership, to know that you're not alone. And I joined a lot of different groups um, to learn how others were um, enhancing their network and what other organizations were doing. I learned so much, and I think diversity in this arena is so important. I still go to events where I don't see a lot of mix in the culture, and I want to change
Mhm.
that. And so I've, become part of groups like WeSys here in Western Canada and encourage others to join and support, because diverse voices allow for creative and innovative ideas to approach challenges with. And so don't do it on your own.
Mhm.
Talk to your peers, talk to your competitors. There's amazing things that you will learn, and it's a team sport where it's the good guys and the bad guys against the bad guys. So we got to work together.
Can you give me a sense of why you feel that diversity is so important? And I know you said it was, for the creativity of solutions, but I'm wondering if you've got like a personal insight or something that you've seen or experienced that leads you to, fully believe that, you need that diversity at the table.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely speak from a personal experience. You know, s- at events or within organizations, I still tend to see a very male dominated environment. And I think as a female in this role, I've brought a sense of empathy, um, especially as it aligns to public sector for the services that they're delivering to our communities.
Mhm.
And I think that has resonated, and it's there's skill sets from diverse contributors that are so important in approaching cyber, because it's not just a technology problem. It's coming up with different ways to allow organizations to better serve their communities. And we do that by bringing skill sets from different mindsets.
Mhm.
And for me, I think that that was one of my strengths, was the empathy and ability to hear but really listen
Mhm.
to my customers and my mentors, and that's helped me to deliver ideas and outcomes in different ways to my customers. So don't overestimate the power of a diverse team. It's silly that we're even talking about this
I
today,
know.
but
I know.
it's still happening,
Yeah.
and it's so important.
Great. And you mentioned that, I mean, you were that person, a while back. Do you recall any of the, the fears or, challenges that you had to get over in order to advance and get into the positions that, you've been in, more recently? Anything that you struggled
Sure.
with?
Yeah. I think this kind of goes into the diversity elements as well. Because I was joining an industry that still tended to be very male dominant and very technical.
Mhm.
And I had some concerns about being able to produce outcomes that were aligned to that technical know-how. And yes, that's absolutely important, but it's also important to align on strategic outcomes, business challenges, constraints, and ideas that organizations are facing. And it's helping to bring that technology in alignment with those strategic initiatives and outcomes that they're so working towards. So there's this push and pull, I think, between technology and people process, which we talked about earlier. And it has to be a balance,
Mhm.
because there's always going to be a conversation that's going to look very different with a CIO or a CISO versus, an analyst. And it's about bringing the right resource to the right conversation, and knowing where your strengths are,
Mhm.
but always being willing to learn.
Mhm.
That is the element that you have to approach every day with, because you're never going to know everything. And if you're curious, um, it's going to put you in a strong position to do well.
And thank you for leading into my next question, which was really about continuous learning. There is so
Mm,
much to learn out there, and things are changing massively, from on a day-to-day basis. What are some, personal approaches that you use for continuous learning, or that you've seen in practice that, that you've, admired or adopted?
mhm. Um, uh, Local ISACA
Mhm.
chapters, they are great for leveraging technical enablement, but also, what your local community is doing. the smartest and brightest and most passionate people in your community. It makes it very easy to reach out and talk with them. So that's been an amazing resource for me. I would also say getting out and attending events where people, process, and technology come together. Talking to real people who are living it day in and day out
Mhm.
and asking them questions and understanding their challenges. That's how you learn.
Mhm.
It's not always, from a textbook or online course. Those are great resources as well. But talking to people, I mean, working for a technology company, that's the most important thing I can say is you've got to get out and talk to people.
Mhm.
Get out from behind the desk and talk to people and understand their challenges and approaches. Um, and then I would just say leveraging networking groups and online learning capabilities. It's so easy to learn right now. You just have to make it a priority. I have some goals
Yeah.
for
What are
me
your
in the new
goals?
year ahead,
What are they?
specifically around AI.
Okay.
Some certifications that I want to achieve there. So I haven't quite outlined that yet, but it's really important for me to have that credibility in my conversations through learning. So I encourage everyone to do that as well. But and it's having a mentor is also an amazing way to keep you accountable. So I highly recommend that as well.
How did you find your mentor? You don't have to name any names, but, what's a good way to find? Because it's not always easy for people to find them. Sometimes people are looking for them.
You know what? What's cool about mentorship is it's very much a give and get. Um, so I thought I would be the one getting, but I was actually doing a lot of giving myself.
Mhm.
And I think that's why it's so rewarding is that is a true partnership.
Mhm.
You have to be coachable, but also be willing to share and learn your experiences. And it's beneficial on both parts, and that's what makes a magical relationship.
That's terrific. I couldn't agree more about mentors. Um, so some career, thoughts or advice for folks. So first, I'd like to ask you for folks who are just kind of starting off in their careers. Do you have or looking at a career change, getting into cyber? Do you have any advice for them that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah. Get involved with ISACA. I would definitely say that.
Hmm.
I know so many people that have gone through, just the mentorships, the volunteering process, the people they've met have landed them job opportunities. The opportunity is so vast. There's so much you can do. So it's really about getting some experience and understanding what you like, because if you like what you do, there's so many pivots and twists and turns you can take along the way that are going to allow you to feed that passion.
Hmm.
So just really understand what you like. And the only way you can do that is by trying it, or by seeking out conversations with those that are doing it. So get involved with your community, volunteer your time, um, walk a day in the shoes of someone you admire,
Hmm.
um, and just see what it's all about so you can feed that passion.
Absolutely. Great advice. And I'm a big fan of, even like if you're within an organization doing that shadowing
Mm.
or cross training, with folks who are on the cyber team or on other teams that you're interested in. It's such a great opportunity. Wonderful. And then, so how about for current leaders in terms of fostering a safe environment? So, based on what you've seen, like what does it look like to actively foster transparency and psychological safety? Beyond saying that, like we hear it a lot, right? Foster safety, foster transparency. But what does it actually look like in practice? I guess is what I'm getting to.
Yeah, I think the leaders that I see doing this very well
Mhm.
are in tune with the business needs and those closest to the work. So they have this understanding of how individuals contribute to the higher organizational achievements. And individuals who understand their own contribution to those organizational achievements feel more motivated to continue to contribute in that way. So I think it's important for leaders to help individuals align to that and find that within their organization. That will build trust and respect. And that respect is going to lead to transparency, um, and diligence in their contribution to their piece of the pie or the portion that they're responsible for, and understand the greater good. When you understand the greater good, those teams are going to be more willing to work cohesively, allowing leadership to have that better alignment and holistic um, visibility across teams. And I also think it's about giving teams technology that they love to work in.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, today in Canada, we have more cyber roles available than the talent we have to fill them. And the talent that's coming up in cyber is they're super smart, right? So
Mhm.
if you can give them tools and capabilities that they're going to love using it, they're going to do amazing work for you. So it's a little bit of all of those elements.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, it's not any one thing, and I really like a lot of the points that you described there. So thanks, Nicole. So last question, if there's one message that you wish more leaders internalized, what would it be? One message.
Oh, wow.
It can be today's message. You can have another one tomorrow. What's top of mind?
I think, yeah, just just think about the foundations of cyber hygiene. It's again about knowing what you have, clear visibility. You can't protect what you don't know you have. Work with your teams to get clarity. Align on that clarity and that holistic source of truth. And that's going to empower your teams to um, do more with more.
Mhm.
um, and it's going to empower your teams to stay ahead of threats and allow them to do the work that they love to do.
That's great. Thank you for that. I think we started off the show talking about, how leaders don't often want to talk about it, but I think what we're saying is talk about it.
Yeah.
And figure it out. So I really appreciate all your messages and all your insights from your lived experience with your clients and the great work that you're doing in the public sector as well. So thank you for being on the show, Nicole, and all the best of luck to you. And to our listeners, I would just say thank you for joining us for another episode of Wired for Change. I hope it brought you some new insights and practices and got you thinking. And if you have any comments, please leave some comments on the show. Leave some feedback for Nicole or I as we move forward. Okay. Thanks very much. Take care.
Thanks, Amy. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nicole. Bye bye.